ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. And NC State entered Winston-Salem on Saturday. Brownlow against Wake Forest. And there's been a handful of what you could describe as the most important game since ... for the Wolfpack. You got to go back to 2010, most likely, where that one would have clinched it. Russell Wilson, Maryland, all that would have clinched it in the Atlantic, but they end up losing that game. You could talk about 2017 for NC State, where had a win. I forgot what the sequence was, but things were headed in the right direction even after that loss to Clemson, the Cal Bambar game. And last night wouldn't have clinched anything because there's still 2 weeks left to the season. But
Right.
NC State would have put themselves in a really prime spot to win the Atlantic Division.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the percentages breaking down on the broadcast, but it was interesting to see what would happen if State had won versus what would happen if Wake won. Because basically now, according to FPI or whatever they use, Wake now has a 14% chance to win the Atlantic Division in spite of the fact that they are in complete control.
And that's the thing. Before we actually get into the dynamics of another loss for NC State in Winston-Salem, somewhere the Jedi Force ghosts of Phillip Rivers and Russell Wilson are watching this going, yep, no, I know the feeling of going to Winston-Salem and losing. And that's the thing, really good NC State teams have gone there against worse Wake squads and lost.
Right.
That's
this
the
is
wild
not one of
part.
the things. Right. That's one thing I was going to say. Usually that's been a thing where they get tripped up there and they shouldn't. Whereas
No.
this year, this is a game between two really good teams. And, certainly for most of the year anyway, Wake's been better so far. So
it probably, at least in my lifetime, this was the most important game between NC State and Wake Forest in football. In my lifetime,
absolutely.
at least. But the season's not over. And
Right.
I think that's one thing we have to clear up kind of going forward. It's really simple. NC State has to win out, and Wake Forest has to lose out for NC State to have a shot at the Atlantic Division. Now, NC State, they got Syracuse, and they got North Carolina to close the season. That's entirely possible. Going 2-0 in that stretch is entirely possible.
absolutely.
Wake going 0-2 is also entirely possible because the first step is next weekend against Clemson, a Tiger squad that has not gone away. I know that nationally, everybody has moved on from Clemson because that's where Dabo has gotten the Tigers in terms of what the expectations are. You're either a college football playoff team or we do not talk about you. But in the context of what we do, Clemson refuses to go away, and that is not a gimme game for the Demon Deacons next week, especially when you look at the history of Wake Forest squads as November rolls on and lack of depth. Now, the super senior seasons coming out of a pandemic and all that stuff has given this Wake Forest team a different look. They're an old team. They've got some depth. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup on Saturday between them and Clemson.
Yeah, and look, Clemson is not an offensive juggernaut still. Dabo said it at the beginning of the year, they're not going to be that this year. But, the real question is, do you have to be an offensive juggernaut to move the football in Wake Forest?
No.
I don't know. Maybe you do based on last night.
That's the thing. And before we talk about the game, I did want to – I get people – emotions run hot when your team loses in a really, really important game. And I had tweeted something out last night, which I believe. People were like, oh, you're trolling, yada, yada, yada. I basically said that 11/26, NC State, North Carolina, Black Friday is going to be the Petty Bowl. And what we just set up is exactly why it's going to be a Petty Bowl. Let's say Clemson beats Wake Forest. Let's say NC State wins their next game. And now you're set up for a final weekend where NC State's got to beat North Carolina to even have a chance at the Atlantic Division. What's North Carolina's season all about the rest of the way?
Yeah, they're trying to play spoiler. That's all that they've been doing the last couple of weeks. That's all that they're going to concentrate on doing.
That's all it really is. It's the Ruin Your Vibes tour. That's the North Carolina.
I think another aspect of that is, look at for instance, what's the one thing that you can definitively say that Mac Brown has done differently and way better than Larry Fedora? There's a number of things, but I can tell you one thing that is significantly different. What is it?
In-state games.
Yep. Big one.
And this is where the pettiness comes in.
Right.
We are set up for one of the most ridiculous statements that's going to be made if North Carolina beats NC State in a couple of weeks. Wake Forest is going to win the division. They're off to an ACC championship game. But what is Mac Brown be talking about? Oh, well, we got the state championship. And that's going to rile people up.
Which is really funny because, like, it didn't seem to bother anybody.
No, it did. But it's really going to rile people up this year. And then if you're NC State and you lose that game, where you've spent a good chunk of the season talking about how they're overrated, nobody's respected us, they're overrated, look at us, look at Devin Leary, yada, yada, yada. Well, then you got to win that game. And that's why I love college football.
Yeah.
Like, I understand you're close to it and your team lost and things like that, but for, like, me, this is why you love college football.
Yeah,
I know,
there's
like,
now there's intrigue to it.
Yes. You know the whole sickos thing that, is kind of taken over in college football? There's this old meme where a guy, he's up against a window.
Yes, it makes me feel seen, Joe. Yes, I'm aware.
It does. Guys wearing. I almost feel like I should pull up the sickos meme here on the thing for people who can't do it. So let me go ahead and look this up real quick. But anyway, so the sickos.
There was a lot of that going around with the Kansas game last.
Right. So with the sickos meme, there's this guy who's like hanging out of a window. Let's pull up the. You have to like know your meme here. You can pull this thing up. It's this is all live, folks. This is all live. So come on. Come on. Wait, why is this taking forever? Come on now. Anyway, so here we go. Get the dang image here. Opening a new tab. I know how to use the computer, I swear. I don't know why people. I don't know why people think I know my computer stuff. Anyway, so the whole point of the sickos meme has been kind of taking over college football, and that's kind of the point right now. People are like, hey, these are the types of things that get you pulled into college football, the little local rivalries and everything else, and that's where things are going to be set up for the most part. Anyway, that's where things stand for North Carolina and NC State, and that's what I mean about it being the Petty Bowl. And I get that people are tight about these things, but folks, like you and I, you and me, Brownlow, we've seen enough of these matchups in the past to know how it goes. And this is set up for like, classic John Bunting, Chuck Amato, somebody standing out there. And people, as one listener pointed out, folks are going to be freaking stressed in that game. And honestly, isn't that why we watch? That's why we watch, right? We watch for this kind of stuff. That's the pull for these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if State was playing for a bowl. I think they were already out of it. Like when the Tom O'Brien streak over UNC started, over the Butch Davis teams, like that was the State team playing for nothing except for to play, spoiler, just to beat Carolina. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of fun in a way. Like, why not? Like, why not play spoiler and win the state title or whatever, whatever you can cling to. You got to cling to something this college football season, unless you're Duke, and then you have nothing to cling to.
Well, yeah, that's another story. That's another story altogether. There we go. There's my sickos meme. I just needed to put that out there, just so people knew exactly what I was talking about. Anyway, let's talk about the actual game, shall we? It was a weird game. I knew going into the game that Wake Forest was not going to hurt itself the same way that it did against North Carolina the week before. That was an uncharacteristic Wake team that we'd seen in the fourth quarter. They took way too many penalties, some questionable play calling. They only had, I think, 5 penalties in this game. NC State, on the other hand, was doing some uncharacteristic things. 14 penalties? They hurt themselves, giving Wake Forest extended drives because of these penalties. A lot of holding calls, a lot of PI calls, all while also getting turnovers. And they got Wake Forest to turn the ball over. They took advantage of Sam Hartman, the quarterback, who has been kind of in a little bit of a funk here as of late. But he still put up big numbers too. It's like again, when I say it's weird is that you can look at the final score and think it was a shootout, but then you can look at the stats and also wonder, man, how did it get to this point? But, turnovers probably negated because Devin Leary did something uncharacteristic. He turned the ball over. And this is something that I know you talked about on Twitter, where NC State's defense has been their calling card all season long. And I know they were dealing with a bunch of guys getting hurt in the process of this game, but they still did their best as they could, even though that there was a killer drive there that we'll get to in a second. But NC State's offense typically can get things going at some point. They never really could.
That was the thing with me. And this has been my frustration with watching State most of this year. The defense has defied every obstacle put in front of it.
Yeah.
You know, the offense has remained relatively healthy, although to be fair to them, I know that Bam Knight got banged up. I know that Ricky Person was essentially playing through an illness. They talked about that on the broadcast. That makes it a little tougher, certainly, to run the ball. But at the same time, like, this has been a thing all year with them, and it just feels like you watch them offensively, you see how good their receivers can be. You know, you see how good Devin Leary can be and some of the throws he can make. You see this offensive line and how much experience it has and talent it has, and you go, well, but what's wrong? Like, why is it not all coming together? Like, why are they kind of middle of the pack offensively in the country in terms of like yards per play? Like, what is the disconnect? Why can they not, when they can move the ball, why can't they score? You know, and I know they had turnovers last night, but that was my frustration watching them last night, you know, in the first half, because it's like the defense is doing, like, you can't tell me what State fans would have thought if you told them like Sam Hartman's like 3 for 19 or whatever the heck he was in the first half. And, you know, they're holding on for dear life, and State can't make Wake pay and score. And that was just, you know, at a certain point, you kind of, I know that the defense gave up some 3rd and longs, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be held responsible for that. But State had so many chances to score points, and against a team like Wake that can put up points in a hurry, eventually that's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah, and, you know, we talk about the weirdness that also happens in Winston-Salem. I mean, there was a game a couple of years ago where a better camera angle might turn replay review around. That happened again as NC State's trying to make this comeback, and they get the onside kick, or did they? I mean, you got a ruling on the field, obviously, and then the head judge, you know, saying his own interpretation. They go to the review. The problem is, because it's Wake Forest, and Wake Forest is like the land of the bad camera angle, apparently, they can't get a good look at it. And, you know, if you're a half a second later getting the ball, if you just go with the initial ruling on the field, I'm not saying NC State wins that game. I'm simply saying that these are the types of things that happen to NC State in Winston-Salem. It's the strangest thing, and it's just going to keep eating at State fans when they can think about the what if, because that's where we are under Dave Dorn. Let's think about this. I know there's a lot of Dave Dorn discourse on social media right now and in my emails and things like that. But in the last 3 of the last 4 meetings, right? Turn any one of those Wake Forest results around. What are we talking about?
Yeah. It's different.
It's different. This one's amplified because of the Atlantic Division implications. But those back-to-back years, you just flip the Wake Forest result, and it completely changes how you discuss NC State's season. It goes from pretty good to that's great. And I know they caught him at the beginning of the year last year in a pandemic season, but so 3 of the last 4 years, these results, you flip them and you talk about State completely different. But who knows? I mean, there's still plenty of season left, and we'll see what happens over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, you know, with the percentages being what they are, there's a reason that Wake, even though Wake won, they dropped to like 14%, and the reason they drop is because they've still got to win one of these next 2. And I know that sounds like, okay, well, why wouldn't they? You know, it's not going to be so easy. State's got their next 2 at home. Syracuse just got absolutely destroyed by Louisville yesterday. Like, I was surprised because Syracuse has been kind of scrappy this year.
Syracuse couldn't recover from Lamar Jackson's outfit.
Oh, well, neither could I. I love him so much.
He flexed so hard. How can Syracuse recover from that?
That's fair. I love him so much. But
he's the best.
You know, it's like that just happened. Now they've got a bowl. I think they've got that kind of puts them out of bowl eligibility at this point. So that takes something off the table for them. And then, you know, North Carolina's been absolute garbage on the road all year. Like, would it surprise anyone if North Carolina went in there and finally played well on the road? Like, no. Of course not. But at the same time, we have no reason to assume that that's going to be the case. And so State has plenty that it can control, because even if it gets in a 3-team tie with, you know, Clemson, obviously, like I think Joe Giglio tweeted last night, like they would win that. So,
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. Buckle up. It's going to be an interesting next couple weeks in the ACC. We'll see you then.